Sport Pods.
We were more determined than ever.
They were an exceptional team with exceptional players and exceptional mentality.
Every time he'd come on, trying to prove the manager he's wrong.
Welcome to the Premier League Storybook with me, Jake Humphrey. We turn now to Chapter 7, the Treble winners. As we've already heard, Manchester United dominated the Premier League's early years, winning 4 out of the first 5 titles. However, there was now a new kid on the block. Arsene Wenger and Arsenal had revolutionised the English game's way of thinking on and off the pitch, and the Frenchman had won the famed double in 97-98, winning the FA Cup and pipping United to win the league. How did Ferguson react? Well, obviously, by pulling off one of the greatest achievements English football has ever seen, winning the elusive treble, stealing the Premier League and FA Cup back from Highbury and winning the Champions League in the most dramatic fashion possible. We'll hear from the players who made it happen. I sat down with Paul Scholes to take me through the season, as well as goalkeeper Peter Schmeichel and the hero of the Champions League, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But first, Martin Keane was a key part of the Arsenal side who'd bloodied Fergie's nose the previous year. What did he make of that summer and United's comeback?
I think it was very clear when, in that summer, they bought Dwight York and Jack Stam. My abiding memory was, they've gone and spent big. And Stamp was probably the key to their success, I felt, really, for 99. I mean, I know we beat them in the Community Shield, but, there were obviously epic games that we could reach the semi-final in Villa Park, and it didn't quite go our way. And the difference between their success and, you could say, our failure was massive. That might well have been even Arsenal's best ever team. Where in 97-98, we had two sets of players. So at that point, we had Steve Bold at the back to help, and we had Ian Wright at the top of the team. 2 really important players, but almost a part of 2 different groups. And then the next year, of course, Ian wanted to go, and so did Steve Bold. They wanted to play more football. But if we'd have still kept to retain those players, I think it would have been better for us. We didn't score an awful lot of goals. I don't think we conceded many goals that season. It might have been way less than the year before, maybe 19 goals or 18, 19, which is nothing. And we lost Anelka with injuries, because you have this with young players, and we didn't have that backup. And that was really, as we say, the extra players that Manchester United made. We lost a couple, and they bought a couple. And that might have been the only difference. But as a head-to-head goes, there was nothing between those 2 teams.
We heard from Peter Schmeichel on Sir Alex Ferguson building United's first great Premier League team. Now, in his last season, he was in a unique position to see that team flourish. What were his feelings going into that campaign?
I made my decision the year before. So, not the year before, but I made it in the summer before that team. And it was something I needed to do, because I was just completely mentally drained. What I realize now is I was probably stressed at the time, because I was just playing all the time, and I never had time to take a breather. I didn't have holidays at any point in the last 4 years. I didn't have a break. I had World Cups, I had European Championships. I had, in the alternate years when the no champs, I had an elbow operation, I had knee, so I was recovering. And I was so tired, mentally tired. I came back from the World Cup, and I just couldn't face another season. So I made the deal then, and then you put it to one side, just try to do your best, and then of course you look back and think, okay, that maybe that was a wrong decision, and maybe I should have stayed. And the thing about with someone like Ferguson, we could have worked around it, but stubborn. You become stubborn, and I've been thinking a lot about it. It's something inside of you. If I like to think that if I hadn't had that stubbornness, or if I'd been different, I probably wouldn't have been the goalkeeper I was, because you had to have so much self-belief and always thinking that you were doing the right thing. If you doubted yourself a little bit, then you'd start to doubt yourself a little bit in games, maybe. So it's easy to fit 20 years. Well, it's actually not 20. It's 20 years after the event, and then try to correct what was wrong, or if something was wrong. And at the end of the day, there cannot be any regrets about that, because if you finish your career at Manchester United by doing what we did that year, I don't think we can leave that club in a better way.
Think of that season, and you think of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. The Norwegian was United's hero in the Champions League final against Bayern Munich, scoring a winner in injury time just moments after Teddy Sheringham had equalised. It will go down in football folklore. It was fitting that Sheringham and Solskjaer ended up the heroes. All season, they'd played second fiddle to a telepathic partnership between Dwight Yorke and Andy Cole. Solskjaer, in particular, was given the nickname Super Sub. He told us his take on that and his memories of the season.
Well, I think early on maybe I wasn't too happy with his nickname, but I think, you know, when you are part of Man United and when Sir Alex talks to you as he did, he's an unbelievable manager, he made me feel important to the team. So I didn't really mind it in the end. And I think that the secret of being a good sub is every time you come on, trying to prove the manager is wrong, he should start you next time. And he knew that. He absolutely knew every time that he put me on the bench. He knew I was going to try to prove a point and always get 100% from me. The last game we lost that season was just before Christmas. And from then on, we went on an amazing run and we just built this character and mentality in the team, never to get beat. And I can't point at one, or well, maybe I can. I think when you ask, Peter Schmeichel's penalty save in the semi in the FA Cup against Arsenal, that is such a sliding door moment. And of course, beating Juventus at any point gives you the confidence of that you can win.
So we've heard from a couple of imports, but the treble winning side had a real homegrown feel thanks to the incredible class of 92 coming of age. They'd had a load of success since first breaking into the team a few years earlier. It turns out you really can win things with kids, but this was their ultimate triumph. Who better to take us through the season than one of the team's key members? Here's Paul Scholes.
So we just need you to sort of rewind your brain about 20 years, if you don't mind. Would you just take us into the feeling at Manchester United? What was Sir Alex Ferguson like? What was the sort of general feeling around the place?
Probably a bit of anger, Jake, to be honest with you. When you see other teams winning, I think I don't think it spurs you on. It makes you more determined. It makes you angry as well at the same time. I always made a point, and I don't know if some of the lads did, when other teams won things, when they won the league, when they won the FA Cup, was watching them celebrate. Because I think that made you... It wasn't nice, don't get me wrong, sometimes especially it wasn't nice to watch, but I think it puts in your mind psychologically that we need to be. That gives you that more determination. But look, we're a great team. It was never going to be easy to come back and challenge again after disappointments, but it's something the manager managed to do.
I heard a great quote actually from an NBA coach a few months ago where he said he loved it when other teams did well because he created a mentality in his team that if you just score a basket, we'll just score another one. If you score 3, we'll score 4. If you score 5, we'll score 6. I wonder whether there was an element of that where actually, of course, you didn't want to go through it at the time, but seeing Arsenal, that was maybe in some ways a good thing for Manchester United.
Yeah, it was. I always thought it was a good thing. Well, it's hard to say a good thing because you're the team that you want to be there, but sometimes just to give you that little nudge, that little reminder that you've got to be better. You have to improve year on year, and it definitely gave us that attitude. I told you that there was an anger built up inside you for the rest of the summer. Do you know when you watch that? You're watching the Arsenal teams, whatever team it was, whoever won, you were jealous. Of course you were. You were angry and you were jealous, and you wanted to make sure next year you came back better, stronger, more determined, and with a will to win like you've never had before.
And talking about coming back better and stronger, were you ever one to go to the manager and sort of talk about areas to strengthen the team or the issues? No, you never did that.
No, I would never do that. That isn't a player's role. I don't think any player. Well, I'm not sure any player ever did that in my era. Maybe players now are bit more vocal, I suppose. Look, if the manager came to you for an opinion, then of course you'd give it. But look, your job is to play with your team, with your teammates, for your manager, ever get involved with strengthening teams or suggesting players to a manager, no, that was a big no-no for me.
Mate, if rumours are to be believed, players these days have it in their contracts that they can decide who comes and leaves football clubs.
Apparently so, yeah.
But one player that did arrive was Jaap Stam. Can you just talk to us about what it's like when a player like that walks in over the summer and they bring an aura and a presence, what it does for the players around?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Look, at the time, I don't think Jaap was that well known, really. So we hadn't seen that much of him. But when he came to pre-season training, I think it was in Denmark actually at the time on pre-season tour, and he came, met us there. Obviously, he'd been playing for Holland, so we had a little bit of extra time, and he just slotted in straight away. You could see with training, he was an absolute beast of a man, an absolute animal. And he was perfect for Manchester United. Manchester United being an attacking team, but bringing centre-halves like that made the team more attacking. It might sound a bit strange because he was a defender, but we knew every time the ball went up to a centre-forward, opposition, he'd just take it off him. He was just that good, he was that quick, he was that strong, he was that powerful, and it freed the team up, really, to be more attacking. And look, I don't think it's any secret Sir Alex was big on attacking and scoring goals and entertaining. And I think it's not just your midfield players, your wingers, your forwards who are involved in that. It's also your centre half, your goalkeeper. You've got to have that discipline and strength behind you to know that you can just relax and think about scoring goals, and that's what made a big difference.
And what was he like as an individual away from just being a footballer? I mean, obviously he's managed 6 clubs, I think, at the time of us recording this. So was he vocal? Was he loud? Was he a leader?
I'm not sure he was. I think he was pretty quiet in and around the dressing room. When things needed to be said, he said them. I didn't really see him as a leader type or as a captain type because of his persona, not outside of football, but around the training ground. He was never loud, never really barking out instructions or anything like that. He just said stuff when it needed to be said, really. So, when you think of him, a big centre-half, big strong character, you think, yeah, captain material. But for some strange reason, I don't really think he really was captain material.
Interesting.
And that's not a detriment to him. It's just the way he was. Absolutely loved playing. Amazing centre-half. One of the best you'd ever seen. The strongest, powerfulest. He just used to bully centre-forwards. But as a captain, I just didn't see that happening.
And what I'm trying to do is just look at all the building blocks that happened before the treble win. And some of them are positive, like Jaap Stam coming in. We'll talk in a moment about Dwight York arriving. But also you had the situation with David Beckham after the 1998 World Cup. I suppose, first of all, how did it feel seeing one of your friends, one of your teammates being treated in the way that he was by not just the press, but, football fans up and down the country when you were playing away games and things?
Yeah, West Ham away especially was a tough one for him, I suppose. Strangely enough, we never really spoke about it that much because I think there was that much attention on him with obviously the disappointment of the World Cup, and there was effigies and all this kind of thing. I don't think we really approached the subject really because there was that much of it going on anyway. If you start talking about it, if you start talking to him about it, I'm sure he must have had just enough of it. I didn't want to hear it anymore. His get out was playing, training every day, and then playing his games. But you have to say he handled it unbelievably well, the stick he had. But I suppose you have to be strong mentally, because there's pressure on every single week, whether you've done something wrong or you haven't done something wrong. There's pressure on to win and perform every single week. And, what he had to cope with was ridiculous, really, from away fans. But we all know how mentally strong he was and how mentally strong the team were.
And even if you didn't talk about it, did it create a kind of a siege mentality among you and the rest of the players that you were going to rally around him or that you were going to prove people wrong, that sort of a thing? Because I think it's interesting this, because it's almost like you're like, it wasn't a massive deal, but externally it felt huge. Like there was the talk of every football fan.
I remember at the time, maybe you couldn't go anywhere without thinking about it. I think it probably does. It probably helped us in a way. As you say, with that siege mentality, we love to be not love to be, but in a position where people don't think you can come back for it, I suppose. We love that. We love proving people wrong. Because you winning trophies, and then all of a sudden you might have a year or a couple of years where people don't believe you anymore. You think you've gone, and that brings a mentality that obviously comes from the manager as well, and the players have to have it, that you're going to prove everybody wrong. And at times we did that, because you have challenges. Of course you do. We talk about the Arsenal team, the Chelsea team, the Manchester City team coming later on. You have challenges, and you have to prove that you can come back good enough, be stronger, and be better. But we didn't do it all the time. But a lot of the time, I think mentality was one of our biggest strengths.
And what about for you personally? Because if my memory serves me right, this is the period where you were great before, obviously, Paul, but you really started to emerge. You really started to impact the team. Did you feel at this point that you were really, really comfortable and really settled?
No, I wouldn't say so. I don't think you can ever feel settled when you're at such a big club in a big team. There's always a pressure to perform, because we have to win. We had to win leagues. We had to try and win European Cups. Obviously, found that a little bit more difficult, but that's just the way we were.
But you moved. Obviously, you were playing up front, and then obviously the arrival of Dwight York meant that you moved into midfield. That was obviously like a seminal moment in your career.
Well, I think it had happened a bit before that, Jake, as well. I'd been moved back into midfield, and look, I was never ever going to be a centre forward, possibly a number 10 in some games, but central midfield was always going to be my position, and it was something I had to learn, something that was different. But I loved it. I enjoyed playing with Teddy, with Dwight York, as you mentioned there, and the forwards in your team are what makes your team special, I think. It makes any team special. If a team doesn't have great centre forwards like we did, then you're going to struggle to win games. And we felt, with the way we played, attacking philosophy, wanting to score goals all the time, we had 4 top-class centre forwards that year. And if 2 weren't doing it for an hour, the next 2 came on and they did it. So, a great team to play in, really enjoyable team to play in. And look, we did flit about positions now and again, and you didn't play some games, you didn't play every game. We were still learning at the time, probably, but no, it was a special team that we always felt we could score. I go back to your point before about the basketball. Man saying, look, if you score 3, we're going to score 4, and that was completely our attitude. And look, you don't want to concede goals, of course you don't, but as long as we scored more than the team, who cared?
Did you have a preferred partnership to play behind?
Do you know what? No. I think all 4 of them were really as good as each other. The main one for me was the link player, was obviously the Dwight York or the Teddy Sheringham. As a midfield player, you ask Roy, you ask Nicky Butt, you ask Veron. You want to play with a clever player in that position. They're the 2. That's the big connection that connects a team to play really good football, is the midfield player and that number 10. Everything else just seems to spark off that. If you have a good relationship with them 2, then look, I didn't care who else was there, but Andy Cole, Ollie Gunnar, they were more off the shoulder, great finishers. And look, every forward I played with, I think at United were top class, so they were all a pleasure to play with.
So let's talk then about 99. When did you start to sense that the title was on?
Probably Christmas time, I think. We were top at Christmas, Jake. You'll have to jog my memory, I don't know. But I think obviously with Arsenal winning that the year before, we were more determined than ever again. I'm not sure if around Christmas time we were top of the league, but it felt like there was a determination every single game because we had such challenges behind us. We had to win. We knew we had to win games. Would it have been around Christmas where you start thinking about the league as soon as you come back in for pre-season training? Because that's what's expected of us. When did we actually? Because it was so tight, wasn't it? As well, you can't actually say in March time, yeah, look, we thought we were going to win the league because it was impossible to tell. I don't think we really thought about the treble till probably beating Arsenal in the semi-final of the FA Cup. I think that was a big one. And then the memory I have after that is the 3 games in a week where we had to win them. You know, it wasn't as if the league was wrapped up with 3 weeks to go. We had to beat Tottenham on the Sunday. We had to beat Tottenham to win the league on the Sunday, which we just about managed to do. I think we won 2-1. Les Ferdinand scored first, and Candy Cole come on and scored the winner. Yeah, David Beckham scored the equaliser. I missed about 5 sitters. I remember that. Got a bit of a rollick in at half time for missing chances.
Did you? What did he say? Come on.
Oh, I went mad. Honestly, I must have had 5 one-on-ones, and Ian Walker at the time saved every one of them. But I should have at least scored 1 or 2. So yeah, manager weren't too happy with that. But no, we managed to win the game, and from then on, look, you think the treble's possible, don't you? Newcastle. I don't want to sound arrogant about this, but we always felt we beat Newcastle in the FA Cup final. We had a great record against Newcastle. Normally, again, managed to come through that. And Newcastle weren't bad. They had a couple of really good chances early on. Roy went off as well, which was a massive blow to us. Obviously, Teddy came on and scored straight away. And the hardest one was always going to be Bayern Munich in Barcelona. We knew what a great team they were. And luckily enough, we managed to come through very late on.
We will talk about that in a moment. I was just looking, actually, Aston Villa were top at Christmas. Remember, they had that amazing start to the season.
Aston Villa were?
Yeah, because they fell away. Do you remember?
Not really, no.
You'd forgotten about them. You'd have been second, I think. I don't have the table. But you were right up there. Chelsea were up there. Obviously, Arsenal were up there as well. So taking all of that into account with those 3 games you just spoke about, was that one of the hardest or the hardest title to win, do you think? Or do you put them all on the same level? Because, you know, to win a Premier League over 38 games is never easy.
When you think about it now, probably looking back, it probably was the hardest one to win. I think the quality of teams in behind us were very good at, especially the Arsenal team. Chelsea obviously were strong as well. But yeah, looking back, it probably was the hardest. A lot of people say that the hardest one's the first one, but I don't think it was in this situation because it was the pressure to go with it of the treble as well. Obviously, I think winning the league is the best thing you can do. Winning your domestic season, being the best team in your country is something we always felt was the best thing. The thing that's seen as the biggest achievement, and we did that a lot. And this was just a bigger part this year because of the pressure that came with everybody talking about the treble. And we had a tough game. We had Tottenham at home. You say it's a tough game. There's always them links, isn't there? I suppose with Arsenal going to the league, and it's funny. It's Tottenham. I'm just going to lie down and let you win the league. I think the same thing with that happened with Liverpool and Blackburn. When Blackburn won the league, we were at West Ham, and Blackburn, Liverpool, the Kenny Dalglish connections that they're going to lie down. But look, it never works like that. And so it was a massive week, major week for us. And that was just the first part of it. The whole season had been built up into this 3 games, to this last week, and Tottenham was the first hurdle to get over, and we managed to do it.
And I can understand why it would feel more special. I was looking at your previous Premier, it was your 3rd Premier League title. You won the first one by 4 points. I think you won the second one by 7 points. I mean, this was like you won the league by a single point. You drew 1 game more than Arsenal. I mean, it doesn't get tighter than a single point to win the league, does it?
No, exactly. And that's why it'll be the hardest, because I'd had experience as a young player on the last day of the season needing to win the league and hoping that's where we go back to that Blackburn Liverpool, because Liverpool actually beat them, but we didn't win our game at West Ham. I think I missed a big chance in that as well. But the keeper was unbelievable.
There's a recurring theme here, mate.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I should have done better. But yeah, so that experience, you know how much that hurts. And you know what? Being at home this time, at the start of every single season, Jake, you take having to win your last game of the season to win the league. I think every single team would do that. When we were there, we managed to get that position, whether it was Tottenham, whether it was Liverpool, we don't care who it was. We'd fancy ourselves to beat anybody at home. It was always going to be a little bit nerve-wracking, a little bit tense. It's never going to be straightforward, and it's Tottenham made sure it wasn't straightforward.
Yeah. And have you got any memories of getting a psychological edge over Chelsea and Arsenal? Because do you remember you played them in the FA Cup and they both went to replays and you got past them both there? Judging by your face, no.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think. Just because it's a completely different competition, I suppose. I think if you're playing league games and you beat them in a league game, then psychologically that is brilliant. You know, when you beat the big teams, where you have the confidence to go to a Liverpool, to a Chelsea, to an Arsenal and win, they are massive games. I know it's still only 3 points and every game's 3 points, but psychologically that's a big blow to teams.
Yeah,
I remember when Arsenal came to us and beat us at Old Trafford, they went on to win the league, and it's a big blow to you. You know, when a team comes to your place, like I said, we wanted to beat everybody. We thought we could beat everybody at home. We thought we could beat everybody away. Obviously, it doesn't always happen, but the psychology of going to these big teams, because let's say we go to Liverpool away, we go to Manchester City away. We know Chelsea are watching, we know Arsenal are watching, and they're expecting you to get beat because these are difficult games. So when you go there and win, or you win comfortably, you know it's just sticking a little dagger in the heart of them teams. And
yeah,
you know, we managed to have so many big moments in big games in March and April, going for leagues, where we go to these places and win, and you know it's a massive psychological blow for you.
What about the celebrations? Because obviously you knew you still had big moments to come. You were chasing the treble. So was there much of a Premier League winning celebration that season, or was it about focusing on the next game and the next opportunity?
Yeah, did you know? I don't really remember that much, because, like you said, if we'd have won the league at any other time, yes, we'd have been on it for 2 days celebrating. Of course we would. But I think we'd have probably had a drink that night, maybe with families together, but nothing too chaotic, nothing crazy, because you knew what was coming. I remember celebrations after the FA Cup were very muted, really, and they're normally quite wild, the FA Cup dues, after the game, especially if you've won. And it was very muted, it was really quiet, because we knew on the Wednesday, we knew on the Sunday morning after the final that we're flying to Barcelona for one of the biggest games of our career. So I wasn't, and me and Roy went, but very muted celebrations. But you know, we upped them a little bit on the Wednesday.
I bet you did. And what about for you personally? Because you were rotating, weren't you, quite a bit with Nicky Butt throughout that season. Were you cool with that?
I don't think anybody's ever cool with not playing. Of course you're not. But it was understandable. As you said before, I was probably transitioning into that position as a central midfield player. And the manager was trying to teach me how to become a different player, really, how to become more disciplined playing in a central midfield role, because as a central midfield player, coming from being a forward player, just thinking about scoring goals, the defensive side of it wasn't something I was familiar with. Being in certain positions at the right time, not always going off, leaving your midfield partner on his own. against 2, 3, 4 people sometimes, especially in big European games. So the rotation, look, I knew it was going to happen. I didn't have that midfield brain yet to play in European, probably the big games. You talk about Juventus away, Nicky played. Can't remember about the home game. Inter Milan as well. I think that was that year. I can't remember if I started the first game. Probably didn't start the away game. Ronnie Johnson even played there in midfield as well. He was brilliant because, going away in Europe especially, the manager always said the midfield is a key battle, and them European teams, they always found a way to outnumber you in midfield. And I wasn't an athlete. I couldn't get around the pitch like a Ronnie Johnson, like a Nicky Butt, like a Roy Keane. So it always made sense for them players to play. And then if we needed a goal late on, or we needed to get back into a game, then I was always an option on the bench. But yeah, it was definitely a transitional period, and that's something I had to learn.
And is that a realisation you had at the time, or one that you've come to in more recent years?
No, when you don't play in a game, you know why you're not playing.
Yeah. So Alex would explain it, would he? He'd be clear with you.
In a round, I think he'd make excuses up, but you know what I mean? He was the best manager, well, probably the only manager, that could leave you out but make you feel $1 million, if you know what I mean. He may still make you feel motivated, still make you feel like you're the best player, you can come on, you can change this game for us. I don't think he'd ever give you the real reason. But if you had a bit of common sense, you knew. I weren't playing in them games. I weren't playing in them big games in Europe because I couldn't get around the pitch. I didn't know that position defensively well enough, and there were other people that were better suited to that than me. And I knew that. He didn't have to tell me that. I knew that, but I quickly had to learn how to be part of a midfield that was more disciplined, and especially in big European games.
And another key part of that midfield was Roy Keane. What are your standout memories of sharing the Man United midfield with him?
Look, he could do everything. Probably underrated a little bit with his quality on the ball, Roy, actually. Great passer of the ball. I love the way he stuck balls into his centre forwards, and you can run off that. A great partner to play against. He's always talking to you. He felt responsibility to run a team because he'd become the captain and become the most experienced at that point. He played under Brian Robson, Steve Bruce, all these top class players, Peter Schmeichel, and he took responsibility to really take this team onto the next level. And he could do everything. He was the energy of the man, the enthusiasm, the quality was just infectious to everyone. Look, don't get me wrong, he was a very, what's the word? He was a man who demanded a lot out of his team. I always say he was like having a manager on the football pitch. The manager's job was done. With his team talk, his half-time talk on the pitch, it was Roy's job to make sure everybody was doing not his job, but I think he felt the responsibility to make sure, not just him, he did just look after himself, that everybody in the team were doing what they were supposed to do.
So we've gone through the difficult times of seeing Arsenal win the double. We've had issues around David Beckham, but then we have the positives of Jaap Stam arriving and Dwight York arriving, and you've overtaken Aston Villa, you've won the league by a single point, you're now in 2 other cup competitions. What was Sir Alex Ferguson's approach then to the FA Cup final and the Champions League final? Was it one of, here's an opportunity to become immortals at Manchester United, or was it treat them as individual games? The first thing we've got to attack is the FA Cup final. Yeah,
but I think especially in the last 3 games, we took every game. Look, I know it's boring, but we have to take one step at a time.
So, do you know what? Would you explain that to us then? Because we hear it all the time. Take one game at a time. Take each game as it comes. And it is like the sort of standard footballer reply to shut the interviewer up and get the interview over and done with. What does it actually mean?
Well, it means what it says. You concentrate on that one game. You're not thinking ahead. You're not thinking in 3 days' time we've got whoever it was, Newcastle in the final, then we've got Barcelona. Because it had come to that point. There might be times in the season when you think, right, we've got them. This is a great chance to go on a run. And really,
Are you not saying though to the other lads like, bloody hell, man, we could win all three here? I mean, we could go down in history as one of the.
I honestly don't remember the conversation ever coming up.
Really?
On the team buses, nothing. Everything was so focused and concentrated. I'm not saying other lads didn't speak about it; they might have done, but it was never something until that last week. You feel possible. You feel it is possible. And the big thing for the manager always, you know what, he took every game by game, because he had to plan his teams. Obviously, with the FA Cup final on Saturday, me and Roy couldn't play on the Wednesday anyway in the European Cup final. So it's all about getting his team right. Who do a rest? Who can I leave out? Who do I need to leave out the squad? We need central midfield players for Wednesday. Roy obviously comes off injured. He has to bring Teddy on. So I think planning was always meticulous from the manager. He probably planned 3 or 4 games ahead, to be honest with his teams. And I think that was probably his biggest job that week, was getting his team selections right, with balancing the quality with the freshness of the players and what was needed for each particular game.
So what do you remember then of the FA Cup final, 1999?
But I always remember being confident. I was never that confident. Going into games thinking we're going to win this. This is going to be easy. I never ever felt that in my life. I didn't feel like that going into that game. I would never want to feel that way. But when I thought of the 3 games we had, I thought this might be the easier one.
And when did you know you were starting? Because obviously, we'll talk about it in a minute, you didn't start the Champions League final for obvious reasons. But when did you know you were starting the FA Cup final?
It was probably about 1 o'clock on the Saturday. 12:30, 1 o'clock on the Saturday. We used to stay in an hotel in Windsor, actually. Every time we got to the FA Cup final, we stayed in the same place. And Saturday mornings were horrible, because you were just waiting for a knock at your bedroom door to be told you're being left out. I think Nicky had it this time. Obviously, Nicky was disappointed, but he was going to be playing on the Wednesday in the Champions League final. That's why it happened to him. And then, if you've not had the knock on the door, you're thinking by about 12:30, when you've had your pre-match meal, he's going to announce the team, and you've got a good chance of playing. So yeah, I knew about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then look, nothing changes if you're playing or not. You're still professional. Be prepared and ready for when you needed to go on, and then obviously you get to the game. Look, the FA Cup final was, I'm not sure if it's as big now as it was, but when I was a kid, especially, it was massive. It was your full Saturday. The weather was always boiling. The helicopters following the team buses, different interviews that you'd never normally see. So that was a big part of my growing up, and obviously to get to the game and score a goal was something now that I still think is really special.
Amazing. So obviously you were starting the FA Cup final, and like Roy Keane, you weren't involved in the Champions League final just a few days later. I saw an interview, with Phil Neville a while back, where he said that when you both picked up those yellow cards that put you out of the final, he said, I remember both of them taking it with grace and dignity and total understanding. But then he said, when we got to the hotel in Barcelona, he said when the buzz started to sort of build up, he said he remembers looking at both of you thinking, he could see it in your faces and in your eyes that, bloody hell, this is massive and we're not involved. Does that ring true?
Yeah, of course it was, yeah. I think when you're at a club like we were, the best bit, the biggest bits were the biggest games, finals, when you could actually be there to make a difference, to make your team win something, which is what it was all about. So yeah, of course, we're devastated. I might not have even played anyway. Talking before about the position, Bayern really good in midfield. I might have been a last 15 minutes player if we were struggling. Roy definitely would have played. We know that. So he was the biggest loss. Losing, as it turned out, he couldn't have played anyway. He did his ankling on the weekend. But I think missing Roy was well, massive miss for any team.
Yeah.
That goes without saying. But then at the end of the game, the jubilation, the crowd, it just felt like a fan. It was, I don't think will we ever see anything like that again. It was just ridiculous what happened.
So you felt like a fan on the full-time whistle as well as a player? You were like, that's an interesting thing because you got both emotions really, didn't you? Because you had to watch it like a fan in some ways.
Yeah, it wasn't great to watch, to be honest. There was a few nervy moments, but I remember I was sat with Roy, I was sat with a couple of staff, Jim Ryan, I think he was a reserve team manager at the time, and we were like fans. We went mad in the crowd, just like a fan would. It was bizarre from really bad emotions 5 minutes before, then all of a sudden you're going ballistic. The whistle goes, you're running on the pitch, congratulating everyone, and look, it still hurts at that point that he wasn't involved, and it probably takes a while to get over it. But you do, there's nothing you can do. The job's been done. The club have won it, the team have won it, the manager's won it. Nothing else matters.
It's been so interesting to sit and talk about this. What's all these years later? What is the single sort of standout memory of that season for you? I don't know whether it's that win over Tottenham that won you the title, whether it's watching on from the stands in the Champions League final, scoring in the FA Cup final. You scored a decent goal as well away from home in the Champions League. Where does your brain take you to when people talk about 1999?
It takes me to a couple of things, actually. I think the first one was at half time because I should have scored 4 or 5 goals against Tottenham. We should have been out of sight. I'll give Ian Walker credit for that. I should have scored. But that was that was something I think about. I think, geez, if we don't win this game, I'm in trouble. We managed to win it, which was great. And then the other thing I think is scoring a goal in the FA Cup final. I mentioned before how special the FA Cup final was growing up as a kid to me. And playing in one would have been brilliant. But to actually score in one and make a goal in one as well was something I always think. Not I always think about, but if I look back on that year especially, I think, and it is weird because it's the FA Cup. It's one special game at Wembley, where the rest of it it's so hard to get to where you want to be over 38 games. But as I said, it was special being part of an FA Cup final winning team because of the history as a kid. I'd been there watching Oldham as a kid, watching United as a kid in all these big historical games, and just to be a part of it was brilliant.
That was cool, wasn't it? Paul has to be one of the most gifted English midfielders of all time, but that 1999 season was when he really came of age, and his teammate Peter Schmeichel had the ultimate swan song. He puts the treble down to the incredible title-winning experience within the squad.
I think it was only Yap and Yorkie who hadn't won the Premier League before, but everybody else has taken part in winning at least one. We had so much experience, so you knew if you get ahead of yourself, you never win anything. And especially at Charlton on, I think, the end of January, that we win that game on I think it's in the 90th minute. Dwight scores a header on the back stick and it hits the post and goes in, and we win this game 1-0. Get 3 points as opposed to 1, and when we do the tally at the end of the season, we win the Premier League by 1 point. That experience, knowing that you cannot think, this is brilliant. We're going to win everything. You have to take one game at a time and never ever get ahead of yourself.
This was the ultimate crowning glory for Manchester United and their domination of the Premier League era up until this point. But what did their rivals make of it? Michael Owen, as we heard in Chapter 6, had the world at his feet as a teenager. Even then, his Liverpool side couldn't get near Ferguson's team.
Well, at the time, we had a really good record against Manchester United. Listen, I remember a couple of times at Old Trafford, or one in particular, when you think you've won and you're 1-0 ahead with a few minutes to go, and all of a sudden, bang, bang, and they beat you 2-1, and they almost had this knack of no matter what happened, you always thought they were going to come back in the dying minutes. They were an exceptional team, led by an exceptional manager, and frustrated the hell out of all their competitors, basically, because they were the team to beat for the majority of my childhood and then the early part of my career. They were an exceptional team with exceptional players and exceptional mentality. End of story.
The triumph lived long in the memory at Old Trafford, even until today. But Rio Ferdinand, who arrived there just a few years later in 2002, was struck by the winning culture running through the club, which, claiming the treble, no doubt solidified.
The standard of training every day. We had some really good days in training at Leeds, but not every day. Do you know what I mean? And you could afford to ghost in training at Leeds a little bit because that was the culture, and it was fine, and you wouldn't get called out for it. Not Man United. There was a standard, there was a culture every day that the standards were high, and if you fell below those standards, you stood out like a sore thumb. So you made sure that you was on every single day you go in that changing room, because you can't afford to be the one that stands out for the wrong reasons, because it filters through to the coaching staff, the management, and then all of a sudden the players think, he ain't up for it every day, he ain't on this. We need people that are on it to win the league. Can't turn it on and off.
The battle between Manchester United and Arsenal raged on over the next few years in one of the most bitter rivalries the Premier League has ever seen. The Gunners and Arsene Wenger had their own incredible season up their sleeve. Join us next time for Chapter 8, The Invincibles.
BT Sport Pods.